Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Tracy's Tuesday Talks. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have an incredibly amazing, wonderful special guest, military spouse veteran Pavithri Kilgore, who is going to make this topic of compliance with labor and employment law not a snooze fest. It's going to be fun, and it's definitely going to be something that if you are a small business or a big business, even if you have one employee, it's going to be pertaining to you. So I will let Pavithri take the floor and introduce herself and her business, and we're off to the races.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pavithri Kilgore. I am the owner of KPSK Consulting. We do full cycle HR consulting for small to medium-sized businesses. So that is anybody under 150 employees, we consider as somebody that we can help. And to be honest, we actually help businesses with one employee or solopreneurs that are just on their own. So you are the only employee for you, yourself, and your business. Yep, exactly. Let's see, I have been doing HR, labor employment law for almost 20 years now. I'm a geek by heart. While everybody on this planet, including myself, thinks labor and employment law is the most boring topic on the planet, I somehow find the humor and entertainment in it. And I read these things and I'm like, I really want to meet the one insane person that did something so stupid that some government legislation decided that this has to now be a law that every employer in that state has to follow. I'll give you a perfect example. This will make you laugh. I was writing a handbook very specific to a state, and almost every state has specific requirements you have to have in your handbooks. And under safety, one of the things you have to include is using your cell phone while driving, right? Most states have a no texting handheld devices while driving. In this particular state, they actually have the line, including watching videos while driving, being illegal under state law.
Wow. Wow.
That is now part of your employee handbook.
Employee handbook. So that law is in an employee handbook somewhere.
Yep, because my guess is there was an employee who was watching a video while driving and got into an accident and cost the company a lot of money.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So you mentioned that you're a geek and that you find the humor in this, which I just appreciate because like I love people with dry humor, right? They're my favorite. I have dry humor. Some people like I tell this amazing joke and only my husband laughs because we've been married for 14 years and he knows me well enough. But
Or
what
he's obligated to by marriage to laugh, as my husband is.
he has to. So what is it about compliance and labor and employment law that lights your fire? What caused that to be the thing that you geek out about?
It's a very fine line between the fairness of an employer and an employee's coexistence in this mutual space of survivability. Right?
Yeah.
You need each other. Whether you like it or not, you have to have each other to meet the end goal. And if you are constantly at this with each other, you are never going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So why not figure out how to make this work so you can have that synergy and have a environment and a workplace that works on both sides as one unit, versus a us versus them mentality that is constantly at loggerheads that makes life miserable for everybody. There's plenty of external forces that makes life miserable for everybody.
Mhm.
And, you know, my dad gave me the best advice growing up, and that was the first day you wake up and you're perfectly healthy and you want to quit, call in sick, quit, because you have a job, not a life.
Mm.
You spend more time at work than you do at home with with your family, your friends. And if what you're doing is making you so miserable, you're at the wrong job doing the wrong thing.
Girl, preach it. That is so, so, so powerful. And like, that's a whole like 5 hours of
That's another episode.
right. Oh my gosh. So what I'm hearing, Pivy 3, is what lights your fire about compliance is really being that peacemaker between the employer and the employee and helping both thrive in an environment that's conducive to growth.
100%.
I love that. I love that. So
Because
what are
every business has to grow. And a business can't grow if they don't have the employees promoting what they stand for. And an employee will never promote what you stand for if if you don't have the buy-in.
yeah. That's so true. Oh my gosh. It's so important to have employees, or if you're an employee, work for a company where your mission and your values are aligned.
100%.
Otherwise, you're just working a job.
100%.
So, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you see small businesses run into when it comes to compliance?
You know, I think the number one mistake I see small businesses making is thinking that they are too small to
Mm,
worry about it.
mhm,
I read a stat a while back that said 80% of small businesses declare bankruptcy because they can't afford some of the fines they end up getting from government agencies or lawsuits because they messed something up they didn't even know they were required to do.
that is insane. 80% of small businesses filing bankruptcy because they were out of compliance.
Because they can't afford to pay the fines. That's sad.
It is. So, what are some of those things that are repetitive that you see patterns in? Like, what are some of those
Right.
compliance laws that you're like, yeah, this needs to happen?
Workers' comp,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Workers' comp insurance is huge. Having them is complicated. It's time consuming. Not having them is career suicide.
Mm.
I'm a solopreneur. I had professional liability insurance before I even had my business license.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, every single contract I sign, my clients get a certificate of insurance from KPSK that says if I make a mistake, my liability insurance will cover them if they get sued. So
Wow.
if you have somebody covering, doing any kind of work for you in a professional capacity, right? Like as a small business, you can't necessarily have 25 employees, right? The reason I have my business is you can't afford to have a full-time HR manager. Let's be honest, me as an HR manager costs a lot of money. That's an expense a small business can't necessarily have. So you use consultants.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to have a consultant, is your consultant really truly have your back?
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. And if they're not giving you a certificate of insurance that says they have your back, you need to take a step back and question, do you have the right consultant?
Right.
Those are the little things that makes a big difference.
Mhm. Yeah.
Vet your consultants, vet out who's touching your business, your accountants, your insurance agents. your payroll provider. If your payroll provider isn't filing your taxes quarterly properly and you get an IRS fine, who's covering your fines?
That's a good point. That's a good point. What are some other hurdles that you see small businesses run into when it comes to compliance?
Policies and procedures,
Hmm.
they don't have any.
Ooh. Mm.
It's consistency,
Mhm.
right? It's everything is great until you make somebody mad.
Right? And then you just get that one employee or that one manager with a stick up where the sun don't shine that just decides to cause a warpath and cause all sorts of headaches and trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in places
Because,
like
I
that
mean,
before.
when it's an office of 3 or 4 people and you have this amazing synergy and everything's working great, and somebody's having a hard time, and you are an owner that feels for them and is in a position to help, right? And says, hey, I'll give you a personal loan to help you get through that phase. That's an amazing human being. 3, 4 years down the road, somebody else is in that same pot, but the business is not in the same position, and the owner can't do that. Now it becomes a personal issue and not a business decision.
Mhm.
If you have a policy in place that says, hey, here's how we do personal loans, and you stick to that policy, you've already avoided that 5 years down the road.
Oh, that's powerful.
It's You don't think about the need for those things till you're in trouble. And my job is to help those businesses realize, put those things in place before you're in trouble.
Yeah.
I had at the time was a potential client. She called me because she had an issue at the company, and she was talking to her husband, who I had worked with at a large corporation a while back. And she was talking to her husband saying, I'm going to need to go find an attorney or do something because I don't know how to handle this. And her husband went, you don't need an attorney, you need a Pavithri. Here's a number, go call her,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And she called me and she gave me the scenario. And I'm like, yeah, we can help you, not a big deal. And we kind of went through all of that, took care of the company. And she kind of took a step back after everything was done. And she's like, he's right. She's like, he's been telling me for a while to call you to kind of get this stuff in place. And she's like, I've been busy running the business. I never took a step back to say I got to get all of these things in place till all bleep blew up. And
Hmm.
she had no choice, right?
Yeah.
Um, but that's something a lot of small businesses don't do. They
Hmm.
don't think about those guardrails being up before they need to be up.
Hmm.
And let's be honest, for most businesses, not just small businesses, any business, HR is a curse word you don't want in your business. And that's why I always say, like, I pride myself in not being a normal HR person. I started my career as an operations manager because I'm old enough that back then HR didn't exist. So to do HR, I had to do operations. And I learned to do HR while managing the business side,
Mm.
which gave me an insight into how do you do compliance while growing a business and keeping that business growth consistent.
Yeah.
And I'm able to do HR in a way that HR can become a powerful tool to help your business grow instead of being that roadblock most businesses see it as.
Mhm.
I I don't know. I'm seriously thinking about making this my tagline, but I feel like it's a little cheesy. I always say, like, my job as a consultant to your business is for you to go make the money for your business, and I'm going to be the one in the background helping you keep your money.
That's good. That's really good. Absolutely.
Because, I mean, you work hard for it.
Hmm.
Nobody else should be telling you where to spend that money.
Yeah.
That should be your decision.
Yeah. And we've talked about like we've touched on compliance, we've talked about HR, we've talked about some labor and employment laws, some mistakes that people run into. Like when I started this business, I was like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know how I needed
I
somebody.
remember we talked about that at the beginning.
We did. You did. I had a wonderful conversation with you, and you like came alongside of me and you gave me some amazing insight and advice, and it was just like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Awesome. Just having somebody come alongside of me who knew what the heck they were talking about and giving great pointers and great advice and some action steps. So what exactly gets small businesses in trouble when it comes to compliance and labor and employment laws? And how does that happen? How does a small business get into the oh crap, the oopsies piece with the law?
So there are government agencies, and there's three layers of them. There's the federal agencies,
Mhm.
right? So you got the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the DOL, Department of Labor, and OSHA, which is part of the Department of Labor,
I'm familiar with
right?
that.
Right. Those are all the federal agencies.
Ugh.
Every single one of those, except for the NLRB, also have state and local versions of them. So, for example, like Illinois has the Illinois Department of Human Rights, which is the state equivalent of the federal EEOC.
Mhm. Okay.
The state has its own Department of Labor. Now, where companies get in trouble is by law, whichever gives the employee the greater protection takes precedence. So let's take minimum wage, for example. Federal minimum wage is $7.25. If your state is at $8.25, but you're in a city that's at $10, your employee that's working in that city has to be paid $10.
Mhm.
There's companies who don't realize that. I've had CEOs tell me that company policy supersedes state law.
Excuse me?
Oh yeah.
No. 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 Okay,
Oh
so
yeah.
that's one way to get caught with your pants down. Okay.
If you're lucky, that's all that happens. And if you don't follow the law, right? So if you don't pay your employees properly, and you're required to keep those records for up to 3 years,
Okay.
because the Department of Labor can audit you for up to 3 years.
Mhm.
Not only are you doing back pay for 3 years, depending on certain states and their regulations, your penalties can be 3 times what the amount you didn't pay us.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. So just by knowing, hey, so this law supersedes this law and this law supersedes this law, and my business has to follow this set of laws out of all of these laws, like sure it might cost money over the long run because especially when it comes to payroll because anyone with
Mm-hmm.
employees knows that payroll is probably the biggest expense that they have.
Yep.
Like, not only would there be back pay involved, but fines. I see what you mean by like you help people keep money in their pocket in the long run.
Yes, ma'am.
So how do businesses like get into hot water? Do employees have to report that? Like, do they do random audits? Like, how does that whole thing work?
Huh. Well, social media helps a lot.
Oh, great.
A lot of times things happen because employees will go on social media and say, hey, this happened at work. Is that right? And then it just starts this firestorm.
Mhm.
And somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody just happens to see it. And the next thing you know, you got a government agency knocking on your door saying, hey, we'd like to see your records.
Whew.
That is becoming more and more common.
Mm.
Another way is employees that know the laws will go to the employer and say, hey, I'm owed X, and the employer will not do something about it. And
Mhm.
they'll go file a complaint with the Department of Labor and say, hey, I'm not being paid properly.
Mhm.
And then the Department of Labor will intercede on behalf of the employee and say, hey, so and so is saying they're not being paid properly. Can you help us resolve this?
Yeah.
And if the employer doesn't respond properly, then they can ask for an audit. And a lot of times the agencies will look at patterns of behavior, right? So if you're a multi-state employer and you're getting multiple complaints out of different locations, they'll be like, hey, what is going on with this company? And then they'll ask for an audit on their own without an employee having to make a complaint.
Wow. Wow.
It's, and there's so many little things that employers don't even think about, like religious accommodations.
Mhm. That was one, so I won't name the employer.
Please don't.
I won't. I won't. But it was very much like I basically had to go to bat for myself and say, hey, this is what the law says about religious accommodations, like where we live, like you are required, unless it causes undue hardship to the company, you're required to give the employee 4 hours on the day of the religious
Mm-hmm,
ceremony, church or Sabbath or not Sabbath, anyway, whatever
mm-hmm.
it is, to be able to go to worship services.
Yeah,
And they weren't wanting to do that. They kept scheduling me on Sundays over and over, despite me requesting that time be blocked off. Like, hey, like, I want to go to church. Please, like, this is important to me.
yeah,
Eventually had to go to the assistant manager and the store manager and be like, this is what the law says when it comes to religious accommodation. Do I need to get a lawyer involved?
yeah,
And wouldn't you know that like 2 Sundays later, when the new schedule came out, I was able to, I had time to go to church.
yeah. The thing that is, it covers a sincerely held belief. Do you know how many employers will tell somebody to their face that's not a real religion?
Mm,
Yeah.
mm-mm-mm. That's not cool.
Because I know. Listen, I can talk about this all day. The reality is the landmines are so many,
Mhm.
and unless you live in it day in and day out, you never know when you're gonna step in one.
Yeah. And what are the consequences of stepping on one of those landmines? Like what happens if you were to get audited? Like we mentioned fines before. We mentioned 80% of businesses file bankruptcy because of these fines.
Yeah,
Like what other consequences are there for not being in compliance?
I mean, you know, check for the Civil Rights Act, right? It's illegal.
Mhm.
There are legal consequences. 99.9% of the time, you're looking at your livelihood, your reputation, everything you have poured your blood, sweat, and tears into building being destroyed in matter of minutes.
Mhm.
And I refuse to believe that people get up in the morning and go, I am going to be a jerk today and go target somebody just because I can.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what human beings do on a daily basis.
Mm.
And 99.9% of the time, these happen because of misinformation, not knowing what they can and can't do, and unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And all I can say is do your research,
Mhm.
get the right partners, protect your investment.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's leave this off on a happy note, because consequences,
Yes,
people automatically consequences and negative connotation. I want to leave
of course.
this video on a positive, joy-filled. I want to work with Pavithri because she is awesome. She knows her stuff and she's got my back and my employees' back.
100%.
So tell me about some of what happens when you do have compliance in the workplace, when you do have those policies written down and you do have people who feel heard on both sides, your employees and your employer.
Longevity,
Hmm.
right? We, I mean, every time I look at the news, you hear about the quiet resignation, the great resignation, the quiet hiring, the mass quitting, the layoffs, all of these things. What nobody's talking about is those happy employees who are coming to work every single day and is enjoying what they do.
Hmm.
I I mean, I'll use me as an example. I got laid off in the tech industry.
Hmm.
And guess what? It sucked. But do you know what though? I was part of an amazing organization in a team that is absolutely one of the best I have ever worked with. That to this day, I talk to them almost daily. I still talk to that leadership. I still mentor some of those employees,
Hmm.
and they'll never not be part of my life.
That's incredible.
And the best part of an organization that have that full cycle employee mentality is a environment and a community that is long lasting, that at the worst of its moments, that is a business decision, they still have your back.
Hmm. Hmm.
When you think about a mass layoff and you've got an employee that is still willing to step up and speak for them and help their employees, that's a company that has been doing something right and good.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's what I want any of my clients to have long term.
Yeah. The word that keeps coming to mind as you're describing what this culture could look like for small businesses is
Hmm.
boundaries.
Is
Bound-
what?
Boundaries. You
Absolutely.
you help companies create healthy, meaningful, growth-minded boundaries that are, of course, you have to have the law be part of like what a boundary looks like.
Yeah.
But essentially, when you have good boundaries in relationships, when you have good boundaries with yourself, when you have good boundaries with your friendships, with your family, with your job, with your employees, with your
Hmm.
company, there's a synergy. I love that word that you used earlier, a synergy, that stuff happens like in a good way.
Absolutely.
So you bring that to companies. You help them create boundaries through compliance and with labor and employment law to be able to create growth and safety and security within the business.
100%.
Pavithri, how do people get in contact with you?
Well, they can go on my website, www.kpskconsulting.com, or they can email me, Kilgore, Kilgore, at kpskconsulting.com, or they can just call me. My phone never gets turned off. 317-779-5113.
Awesome. Pavithri, thank you so much for joining me on Tracy's Tuesday Talks. Do you have anything else that you want to just, hey, this is the one thing I need to say before we sign off for today?
Protect your investment.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I miss you. It's so good to connect with you like this.
You too, Pavithri. Thank you so much for joining me. And guys, thank you for watching. It truly is an honor to have y'all come back time and time again. Pavithri genuinely is the real deal. Please reach out to her, get connected with her, and have an amazing conversation with her. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much and have a blessed day.